I think first thing first, I would like to thank all of you here for steadfast support. But first thing first, let me introduce the esteemed panelists today we have with us. Again, no specific order of merit. I'm just going down the list that's being displayed here. So my name is On Chi. For those who were here yesterday, at the same time slot, I think you can recall I was presenting on the MTCS standard. So let me introduce my fellow panelists. We have Peter Moore, MD of Public Sector APAC in AWS. Thank you very much, Peter. Alan Wu, thank you very much for CTO for New Media Express. Indrani, MD of ISC Singapore, which is a certification body that is now providing certification services for MTCS. Chris from TUV SUD PSB, also from a certification body providing certification services for MTCS. Andreas from TUV Redland, again another certification body, that's providing such services for MTCS. As you can see today, the topic of today's panel, MTCS, Achieving Trust Through Transparency. Now, the first questions I have are targeted towards the two CSP, Alan from New Media Express and Peter from AWS. The first topic I'd like to hear from you is, what are the reasons, the drivers that actually drove you to go for the MTCS certification? Now, if I may, maybe closer, may start with Peter first then.
Cloud certification and certification in general is an indication of the ability of an organisation to meet the requirements of different countries' needs when it comes to the security of their products and services. At Amazon Web Services, security is our number one priority because it's the number one topic of conversation whenever we go and talk to our customers, and we ask them if they, it's interesting. You ask one customer why they are using Amazon Web Services, and they'll say because it's got great security. And you'll ask another customer, why are you not using Amazon Web Services? And they said, because we're concerned about security. So I think it's very important for us to have third-party assessment of our security capabilities. And so MTCS was an opportunity for us to demonstrate to our customers, in particular in the Singapore market, that we're serious about security, and that in fact our technology and our operational controls meet or exceed the requirements. So we were very happy to be able to achieve MTCS Level 3. The interesting thing about MTCS is that it is a multi-tier cloud security standard, and it allows organisations to meet those various tiers. So by meeting Level 3 MTCS, we've demonstrated that we exceed the requirements necessary for running highly confidential workloads. And so for us, what that means is that our customers, both commercial and government, now have the confidence to use Amazon Web Services with highly confidential data, and be assured by a third-party assessment that we have a very highly secure environment, we manage very tight operational controls, and that the data will be secure.
How about Alan from New Media Express then?
Okay, from our side, it's pretty simple. It's mainly to build trust with our customers. With this certification process by a third party, we provide confidence, increase the confidence level for customer to host on our side. The second reason is more towards the mandatory requirement because we are one of the awardee of the bulk tender with IDA. So for the future IDA bulk tender, MTCS will be a mandatory requirement. So we have to meet that anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much to Peter and Alan. Now, besides complying with the regulatory requirements, perhaps from the 2CSP experience, what are the unique experience that you have encountered, or the value add or even challenges, both good and bad. Let's make today's session open, right? So what are good and bad experiences you had, in the process of achieving that certification?
So the good experience is that, MTCS is essentially based on ISO 27001. There was a set of documentation that was produced by the standards body that essentially said what the differences were between ISO 27001 and MTCS. So in certifying against MTCS, we did not have to start with a clean sheet of paper because we already had ISO 27001 certification, global certification. So it was merely a matter of looking at what the differences were. So the good experience was basing it on our existing certifications meant that the process was quicker and easier to achieve. The other good experience is that we actually did not need to change anything to achieve the certification because that would have been a major headache for us. Being a global service provider, global cloud service provider, what we try to do is to manage our global infrastructure in a consistent way, and that's for the best experience for our customers as well, because we're able to be very agile, deploy our features and services in a very agile way, and we didn't want to have a specific set of requirements for our features and services in Singapore, which would have made it very tough to both achieve the standard and very tough to maintain that over time. So they're the good things. I think the challenging thing is that there was a number of requirements in the specification which I would say were a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit dated in terms of having requirements about doing things which may have been relevant if we were just merely building a data center in Singapore, for example. But again, being a global cloud services provider, we need to be able to do things in a very consistent way globally. And I think through going through the assessment with the certifier, the certifier was able to audit us and actually see that the way we actually do things actually, whilst maybe being a little bit different, exceeded the actual requirements of the standard. So it means that it's good to have gone through the process with an understanding that the intention of MTCS is to ensure that cloud service providers meet a very strict set of requirements and can demonstrate, the standard demonstrates some clarity between what it takes to run very low sensitivity type workloads like a website or with public data or something like that, all the way through level 2, level 3, where level 3 is about, as I said, highly confidential data. So it's nice to have a standard, I think, that actually outlines the different requirements for those different tiers of workload, because I think that customers actually care about, is the infrastructure they're going to be using, can they be confident in that, using that for their confidential data. And a lot of the standards don't actually talk about the confidentiality of the data, where MTCS calls that out. So I think that's a positive as well.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, Alan, being a strong local CSP, Alan brought an interesting point that they were already ISO 27001 certified. That's part of my lack of knowledge. Do you actually start from scratch, or you were also ISO 27000 certified? So perhaps you can share with us your experience in that aspect, being a strong local CSP player.
We are currently not ISO 27001 certified.
So you started from scratch?
So we are starting from scratch. We currently we are certified for the MTCS Tier 1, which is the lowest tier. Majority because 80% of our customers are small and medium businesses. Adding additional security layer means add more cost to our customers. Agree.
So what's the experience or the pain points that you guys have gone through since you guys really started from scratch?
Yeah. I think some of the requirement in Tier 1 are too stringent.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be putting into tier 2 or tier 3, but it happened in tier 1.
Okay.
Yeah, I just point out example, things like there is a requirement to provide is encryption on the VM images, which the current technology from most of the hypervisor or virtualization software vendor doesn't have this capability yet.
Okay.
So that means when you run a VM image, either from any VM hypervisor vendor, your image is running non-encrypted. So if any employee can copy this image and copy it to any place. But in order to achieve the encryption methods, we have to do a full disk encryption. Means when you boot up the operating system, it's already encrypted of all your data. So this requirement actually create for us is kind of pretty stringent. So every system we run had to be encrypted to achieve these requirements. But because majority of our data we host even under the IDA bug tender, we are hosting only public data. Under the IDA bug tender, in the classification we do,
These are
we can't host classified data
These are unclassed
anyway.
data.
Yeah, so I personally feel that this requirement in tier 1 are a little bit too stringent.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the pain point we're facing. Yeah.
Okay. Any good experience then? Did it improve any processes or controls you have? Okay. Other than this encryption, any good positive experience?
Yeah, I think going through the MTCS process, it does pick up some of our loopholes or backdoor that we have in our existing systems.
Okay.
So it gives us opportunity to close off all these loopholes.
Okay.
So it actually makes our operation more secure now. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as a member of the working group that drafted this standard, I'm glad that it has some positive value, and I also appreciate your feedback about the pain points. Same from Peter. Now, MTCS is still at version 1, so we will need more valuable feedback from the industry players. Like what Alan mentioned, maybe certain controls might be more appropriate for level 2 or level 3. I think it's due for update soon. So for members of the audience, if you have any feedback, I think there would be a period where we will be seeking feedback for the industries. I think NCCO, Yao Sing side will be, our Hinian's team will be seeking feedback for the industry players. So I'm not, again, even though I'm a member of the working group, I'm not going to say that it's perfect standard. So it is a continuously learning experience where we'll continue to fine tune based on the feedback from all of you in the audience and on the panel. So I appreciate the feedback from the two CSP. Now, let me open this, perhaps similar questions to the various certification body then, because you guys are the folks who crack the whip on the CSP. Now, again, no particular order, I'm just following the order here. Perhaps let's start off with Indrani from IIC Singapore on the experience that you guys have looking at MTCS vis-a-vis other standards, because you guys are doing certification for more than just MTCS. You have your ISO 27001, ISO 9000, so on and so forth. So what is so unique about the MTCS, and if you have gone through a certification audit, what are the salient points that perhaps the audience could take note of while going through the audits, again from your experience? Yeah.
Thank you, Anchi. Typically, I'm fortunate enough that I was part of two of the world's first standards. For example, I was part of the team of the world's first ISO 27001 certification within a few days of the standard being published in October 2005. On the internal side, I had got Accenture certified on that standard, and now I've been on the certification side of things, being part of the multi-tier cloud security certification, which is the world's first multi-tier cloud security standard. Typically, like you mentioned, it's a learning curve for the working group, the focus group members, and the certification body. Having seen the evolution of information security standards, I can definitely say that MTCS is a progression on that information security journey to give more security, assurance, and build trust for customers in the cloud. At the same time, both from the certification body and the CSP, the key thing to note is no pain, no gain. So from the cloud service providers, they had to invest their management time, effort. At tier 3, you also have to, for example, show board level commitment to information security, and sometimes looking for evidence at a board level means precious time, even at the senior most level of an organization. So those are things that in traditional ISO certifications that people didn't have to budget time for. But now when you're looking at tier 2, tier 3, you're seeing that the concepts of COBIT, IT governance, where they're separating governance from the actual management of operations, those principles are slowly being incorporated into standards. And that, I think, the first reflection of that are some of the elements of cloud governance. Also, ISO 27001 was geared towards site-specific data centers, while MTCS, like the FedRAMP certification, we also do the FedRAMP certification in the US. And globally, we've seen that our US CSPs or even our European CSPs who are have got themselves FedRAMP certified versus MTCS certified, see that there is a value add of MTCS compared to even if they have been through a cloud certification in the US. Thank you.
How about Chris? Chris from TUV SUD PSB.
I think I talk about the challenges first. Our normal audit hour per day normally is from 9 to 6, 8 hours. But during my first MTCS audit, right, it ended at 8+. And I'm still struggling, can't finish the whole thing. So you can see that MTCS is very comprehensive in terms of controls. In fact, I think for those organizations who want to go for MTCS, right, I think the first and foremost that you all should do, right, you should do your what we call a gap analysis, so that you can compare what the standards requirements against what you have now. Then you can do a baseline to see what are the additional things that you can do rather than just jump straight to the MTCS. For those that are ISO 27001 certified organization, right, things will become a little bit easier for them because as MTCS is largely based on the ISO 27001 standard requirements plus. The plus come in the form of cloud services security requirements. So MTCS, right, I would say is thorough, but we are also learning from a certification body perspective, like what Alan mentioned. Not all the CSP provider, right, will have this encryption of VM. So it's good that, I heard there are some revision for it, and then probably we can provide input to you guys as well. Thank you very much.
How about Andres?
Okay. I would like to highlight the differences between 27001 and
can you put the mic closer to you or?
Okay. Hello?
Yep.
Better?
Yep, good.
Yeah? Hello?
Yeah, that's
much
better.
I would like to highlight the differences between 27001 and MTCS, because for many organizations maybe the question is, should we go for MTCS or should we start more with a general one? So I think both standards have a good point and a weak point. Highlighting first 27001. So 27001 is a very generic standard. It is meant to be generic and basically should be applied in every context of an organization. However, it's very challenging to put this in place because of this generality. Yeah? What does it mean? What the standard really asks you to do? You have to read a little bit between the lines and make interpretations. a big advantage of MTCS. It is a customized standard to a specific industry. It speaks your language. It's straightforward. It's not as abstract as 27001. So I would say if you're in a cloud business, this is a perfect start for you. Grabbing a standard which speaks your language, which gets you ahead to make you competitive in an international context of that international business. So starting with MTCS, and maybe in the next step looking how to harmonize your implementation with a more general framework in a more general scope. So that would be one thing I would like to recommend for colleagues who are thinking about what I should do first. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So just want to highlight for those who are even looking at the 27001, I highly recommend to look at 27002, which is the so-called guidelines on implementing the ISMS2. Now, thank you very much, Andres, for the good positive feedback. If for those who have seen MTCS, it is a pretty interesting standard. It combines, if you look at similar ISO standards, it combines 27001 with 27002, where we talk about the controls and the detailed controls, implementation controls. And I think there's also content about the audit procedures. So hopefully that can also help the auditors, which is, if I'm not wrong, that's under 27007 and 27008 for the auditor standards. So MTCS actually aims to combine various aspects into a single document so that readers like you do not need to buy 3 copies just to go through the audit and so on and so forth. So perhaps just to explain the rationale behind why it is pretty interesting for a standard to have all these kind of perspectives. Now, again, that's I think we have here very good and interesting and valuable feedback. Now, I would like to change the discussion to go towards how achieving the certification. Now, this is will be most likely directed towards the 2 CSP panelists. How do you see that achieving the certification help ISVs, okay, independent software vendors, or even the portal developers who decide to host their services on your infrastructure? If I'm not wrong, you two are infrastructure provider, right? If you are a SaaS provider, do correct. I stand corrected. But from what I understand, you guys are infrastructure providers. So perhaps you can share with me what are the positive values you see, and perhaps what kind of feedback that you have received today from the ISVs who now can host their services on your certified MTCS certified cloud infrastructure. Perhaps Peter.
Yeah, so we try not to use the word infrastructure and app and platform and software as a service because it's not very well defined, and so but I will clarify that at Amazon Web Services we do offer features and services in those 3 categories. So for example, we do have a virtual desktop environment that we have available. We have a collaboration tool called Zacalo that we have available, and you might call them software as a service. But specifically to answer the question, and by the way, it's a very good question, customers need to recognize that when they use a cloud service provider for infrastructure, that the cloud service provider is responsible for the security of the cloud. The customer or the application provider is responsible for the security in the cloud. So there's a difference there. Let me use layman's language to say what I mean. A customer says to me, if I put my website on Amazon Web Services, will it be secure? And I'll say, well, it depends if you make it secure or not. Because you can put a website on any cloud service provider's infrastructure and leave the wrong ports open and have it hacked very easily. So that is not something that a cloud service provider can completely prevent. So it is very, very important to understand the difference between of the cloud and in the cloud for both applications and for data. So specifically, what can application providers, ISVs, SaaS providers gain from hosting on a cloud service provider that has attained MTCS? Well, actually, they can inherit the certification of the cloud service provider for that infrastructure. So rather than having to actually build their certification based on a specific hardware specification and a specific database and a specific operating system and how all of those features come together, as I said, they can inherit the underlying infrastructure certification. So their process of certification can be shortened dramatically. So if an ISV wants to host on Amazon Web Services and they want to be compliant with MTCS Level 3, for example, because that application is going to be hosting highly confidential data, then by hosting that application on top of Amazon Web Services, they can inherit the underlying infrastructure certification, and then they can work with one of the certification providers to audit their application and the way they've architected that to ensure that the entire stack of the application and the underlying infrastructure is going to manage the customer's data in such a way that the customer can continue to be assured that their highly confidential data will not be at risk. So that's an important component. It's similar, if you like, to the fact that when you certify for MTCS, it's a lot easier if you've already certified for ISO 27001. You inherit that, but so it's just going up another level where the application provider is actually inheriting the underlying MTCS capabilities. So that's another really positive outcome for us as Amazon Web Services, is that, you know, if application providers want to sell their solution to the government of Singapore and they know that the customer is going to actually have confidential data, then that's a positive for us because it's a lot easier for them to do that on Amazon Web Services. Dare I say, easier to do it on Amazon Web Services than if they try to do that on on-premise hardware, for example.
Okay. How about Alan then?
I think Peter have very much clarified everything.
Okay, so same points,
Yeah.
right? Oh.
I think the key value point for a software ISV who deploy their software or SaaS services on an MTCS certified provider is that we take away that complexity in the infrastructure layers. Things, for example, like having a disaster recovery site, and things having the running data backups, and some of the critical services are being better taken care of. So SaaS service providers shall only need to take care on their own segment, as Peter described that off the cloud or in the cloud. Yeah, that's a pretty common issue that we are facing, that when customer come to host in our environment, we can make sure the parameter is secure, but if they doesn't make sure their own source code is secure or being reviewed, then that's pretty much nothing more we can do. Yeah.
Now, ever since both of you have achieved that MTCS tiered certification, do you see ISVs coming to you to inquire about or even to express their interest in getting MTCS certification since you guys have gotten it? Yeah.
Yeah, and let me also, just for purposes of informing the audience, one of the important things to recognise about data is that people think about confidential data being the secrets within an organisation, but it's very important to recognise that PDPA-based data in Singapore is also should be treated as confidential data, because in order to comply with PDPA, you have to treat privacy-related data as confidential data. So another important reason for an application provider who's going to be managing information about people's names and addresses and all of the privacy-related data, they really need to be thinking about MTCS as being some clarity and confidence around the certification. In terms of ISVs coming to us, a couple of things. One is we've been working with IDA on a program called accreditation, which gives software providers the opportunity to be audited, if you like, by IDA in terms of their background and their fit for purpose and all of these sort of things. And we're actually participating in that program so that we can host those startups. And the idea is that in the past it's been very hard for these new startups to win government contracts because they have to go through very comprehensive tender requirements and background checks and financial fiscal responsibility, and it's very, very challenging. So through the IDA accreditation program, these small companies have got the opportunity to go up against some of the larger, more traditional software providers. So being able to host those software providers on Amazon Web Services with its MTCS Level 3 certification means that not only do they have the support of IDA in terms of winning business, but it's a mandatory government requirement for MTCS compliance, and they can, as I said earlier, inherit that capability. So all of this means that it's much easier for them to go to market, much easier for them to take their great ideas and their innovation and actually have it deployed throughout the government-linked companies in Singapore. So it creates a real market opportunity for them.
But just again, to be more specific, do you guys provide advisory support or for ISVs who are interested in getting the MTCS certifications, or do you provide some kind of a sporting hand?
Yes. So a couple of elements of that. One is, at the end of the day, any ISV that wants to move to the cloud is going to have to learn about how to do that in the cloud. So part of what we're doing is we're offering free credits to them so that they can experiment and learn the technology in their journey to the cloud. That's the first part. We're also offering mentoring workshops where we're actually going to get these software providers and give them architectural advice on how to build a well-architected application in the cloud. So, for example, because availability is so easy to use in the cloud, you can have multiple availability zones. A lot of people who build software don't actually think about that. And so bringing those applications to the cloud all of a sudden enables capabilities in terms of reliability, performance, availability that adds to their capabilities. And so they can then be assured that if the underlying infrastructure has a problem or an aeroplane falls on a data center or something, that their application will continue to function. So these are all sort of part of the guidance that we're going to give to these software providers in their journey to the cloud. And MTCS is just one of the enablers, as is the business mentoring, as is the IDA accreditation program. Because at the end of that program, as I said, they'll have an opportunity to more easily sell their offering to the government as well.
Okay. Thank you for a very detailed explanation of the services support. Now, Alan, do you have anything to add on to the questions?
After we attend the MTCS, we do get quite a number of inquiries from the software service vendors. I think there's some common misunderstanding that I would like to highlight is that there is a common question that when they put their software into our cloud, does it mean their data is being encrypted or being protected or being secured? That is a common misunderstanding area. So as just now I mentioned about the full VM image encryption. So we done the full VM image encryption on the whole system level. So that means that any of my employee, when they copy the whole image out from our infrastructure, they can't read it. But then when the software service vendor deploy the software services on our cloud, their database administrator, their programmer can still read all their own source code and the database data inside. So if they don't encrypt the customer personal data in their own software, that doesn't help anywhere.
Okay.
So that is a very common understanding that we do. I do personally provide quite a number of free consultation to a lot of software service vendors. Another aspect of it is that after we attend this MTCS certification, we do have inquiry that customer who want us to provide to help them to build a MTCS certified private cloud environment.
Oh, you have that request?
Yeah. So
Wow.
that means they want to build a cloud infra as what we have, exactly
Okay.
the same.
Okay.
And then they want to have a fast track to the MTCS certification, so when they load their own software on it,
Interesting.
it have a faster
Okay.
track.
So that's beyond the ISVs that we were talking about.
Yeah, that's something beyond that. Yeah.
Okay.
So currently we're already working on one customers.
Okay.
So he's building a private cloud that with his software he need to be MTCS certified, but we help them to replicate our whole blueprint of our infrastructure in his environment. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You're open to sharing the whole cloud infrastructure blueprint. Interesting. So thank you very much to Peter and Alan. I think these are valuable feedback and expert advice. Again, I can't emphasize more that cloud security is a shared responsibility between the CSC, cloud service customer, and the CSP. So the owners or the ownership of security cannot fall solely and flatly on the CSP alone. That's what Peter and Alan has mentioned, right? They can provide you the secure infrastructure, but you use software that has a 0-day or SQL injection vulnerability that's in OWASP top 10. People can drive right through to your information. Now, perhaps let me just switch the discussion to the experts from the CS, from the CB itself, certification body. Now, in your view, if ISV who wants to host their services on the MTCS certified CSP, what are the additional controls or areas of considerations they need to look at for themselves to achieve the MTCS certification? Because that's what Alan and Peter has clarified. Even though they are certified with MTCS, it doesn't mean the ISVs themselves are automatically certified. So, what are the additional considerations that you think they should be taking note of before they come to you to say, hey, I'm running on either Amazon or New Media and I want to get a certification. Can you just give it to me since they already are certified? No. Most likely the answer is no. You need to do the following controls, right? So what are the tips that you have for the audience here? Yes, again, start off with Indranil from ISC then.
Obviously, the risks for one of the key elements of MTCS are any IT standard that has come out post 2009 incorporates what is called ISO 31000 on risk management. So the risks, one of the key things that an ISP needs to do is have its own risk assessment, which needs to be separate from that of and include the risk that they would have in their internal environments. I guess both the CSPs talked about encryption, and an important element of the MTCS standard is cloud key management. We've seen that any of the cloud security vulnerabilities that have happened in the recent past have occurred due to credentials being compromised and the keys being stored often the root cause of that could be attributed to the encryption keys being stored in the same environment. So that's a very, very important consideration to take. Obviously, each of the CSVs are providing their architecture and blueprint in terms of guiding their respective ISVs on their certification journey. So they can take advantage of the underlying infrastructure risk and controls, but they need to do their own risk assessment and they need to understand the terms and conditions of their respective engagement with their cloud service providers so that they can leverage it, but at the same time take responsibility for the elements that are within their control, whether it's their data, their apps, and obviously how the encryption and the keys, cloud key management among that is a key factor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about Chris then? Any advice for the ISVs who may want to go for MTCS while running on MTCS infrastructure?
I think I agree that risk assessment will be the number one thing to consider first, because you cannot just depend on the CSP as what Alan has mentioned. They only provide that part. You yourself from CS user perspective, right? You need to cater security from your end, and the number one to start off with is a risk assessment. Then you'll come up with your own probably security policy, information security policy, and with the relevant physical and logical control. I think one of the essential control I can think of is basically access control. Yeah, both to the office and both to the your computing equipment and to your application and data and so on and so forth. So whether to do encryption or not, again, is the result of your risk assessment. How you see the importance of the data from your end. Yeah.
Thank you very much. How about Andreas then?
Yeah, risk assessment is a key, and there's a particular aspect related to business continuity and service level agreements. So if you build on a stock of another cloud service provider, you have to make sure that your service level agreements are basically matching to the service level agreements you depend on, so that you don't promise more than you actually can get delivered from your cloud service provider on which you build. But the overall key issue is understanding risk management deeply and understanding the interfaces, the technical and organizational interfaces between what you are doing and what your cloud service provider on which you build on is doing.
Okay. Now, we are down to the last 7 minutes. I'm not going to use out the full 7.5 minutes because you guys have not had lunch yet. So I'll perhaps come to the parting, the concluding remarks from the panelists. Any final advice for the audience on the floor in terms of the journey, the pursuit to get MTCS certification? Now this time around, I'm not going to go. Let's just go for Andreas all the way to Chris from right on the extreme left. So, any parting statements, final words for advice for the audience here?
Okay, I think MTCS is now at a revision 1. It is an evolving standard, and there's many things going on a global scale, especially what is coming from the European community, personal data protection, the merging of an ASEAN market. I think you have to find out where you complement on a voluntary base, basically MTCS requirement, which it's not yet a total global coverage. So just don't rely only on MTCS. It's a perfect start, but cloud business is global business, and many things coming up. So please have a watchful eye.
What I see as a global trend for a lot of the cloud providers, and I'm seeing that out of the small startups in Singapore and the startups in Silicon Valley, is the trend of integrated management systems audits. That means a trend of doing your ISO 27000 and your MTCS and other IT-related standards like ISO 22301. For which we also certified, for example, the Singapore Stock Exchange recently. So we see that whether from federal contractors to CSPs across the world, you can save management time, do integrated audits, and if you're, for example, in the financial sector, look up the new standards like ISO 27015. If you're in the healthcare, look up ISO 27799, so that it doesn't surprise you. Depending on your industry profile, your risk profile, look at the certifications that will add value to your business and give security and trust to your customers. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Peter?
Yeah, a couple of things. MTCS is just a step in the journey. It's not the end. There'll be a continuous evolution of security standards as more of the world becomes connected. The world's a pretty hostile place at the moment, and I think that these standards are a very important step towards making people aware of how important information security is. But there's also a big burden of responsibility on the users of the technology as well. It's important not just to be able to meet the controls and have the ability to certify against these standards, but also the tools be made available from cloud service providers to give the customers visibility into the applications that they host, give them control over the user's access, identify security risks in terms of identification, in terms of networking ports, etc., etc. I think it's very, very important that people realise that if in a managed cloud service environment, a lot of these tools and capabilities actually make your job a lot easier. If you try to do all of these things that I've spoken about, manage user identity, manage access, root access, look at the visibility into your network topology, your hardware topology, audit all of the user access, and also have an audit trail, so have a log of everything that happens. In your organisations today, do you know everything that happens, who did it and when it happened? So that if something goes wrong, can you go back and look at why that went wrong? Really important. I think a lot of the major headlines around the world about inappropriate access and sharing of information, I won't mention any names, but he lives in Russia now, is a clear indication. It doesn't matter how secure your systems are, but if you can't audit and find out what happened and who did it and why they did it and what they took and all of these things, then it can be a huge problem. So I just raise this as another thing for people to think about. As I said, using a cloud service provider who has all of this available in a very easy to use fashion is also really important for you as users.
Thank you, Peter. How about Alan then?
Yeah, as the MTCS, there's three tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So for organizations who are looking to get certified, have to carefully evaluate which tier they want to go for the certifications, and because each tier has its own different set of requirements. You have to match your own business models and what your customers require. Doesn't mean you always have to go for the highest tiers, and because more security always means more
higher
inconvenience.
Cost,
So it may end up creating a lot of inconvenience for yourself and your customer with the highest tier of security. It doesn't make any business sense in some cases. That's what I want to highlight.
Okay, how about Chris then?
I think for those CSP out there, right, just ask yourself this question. Is security important to you from an organization and business perspective? If the answer is yes, then MTCS is for you. So I think, again, how do we go about doing it? I think, as I mentioned earlier, you need to do a gap analysis. But even before you do the gap analysis, you need to do one thing. Do you know what is that? Get a copy of the SS54 MTCS standard.
Yes, I think yesterday's session, Yao Sing kindly reminded the audience there's a 20% discounted offer for this week, and 60. Sorry? Up to 6th of November, sorry, not up to this week. So, and you can get an order form from IDA booth. Now, there's only half a minute left. Thank you very much for the panelists. Any questions on the floor regarding the experience of getting MTCS? Any questions for the CBs? How to get an MTCS and so on and so forth? Any questions for the floor? No? Okay, I'll release you guys for lunch. They're all hungry. Thank you very much. Let's give our panelists a round of applause for expert advice and valuable experience that they shared with us. Thank you very much then.